Before we start today's roundtable, I want to give special thanks to Checkster, our group sponsor. Checkster has become well known in the recruiting industry by providing a platform that easily captures reference checks in the hiring process. I myself have been a customer of theirs for years. I use a reference checking tool for all of my new hires. However, Checkster has now released a new product suite called Insights. This new product suite is really what has excited me to have Checkster as the group sponsor. With Insights, the Checkster platform now covers employees from cradle to grave and not just reference checking, starting when they apply, going to offer, through onboarding, then covering their work at your company, and then to the end with exit interviews. It's an easy to use, easy to understand way of giving and getting feedback from your peers. Checkster's simple goal: to build more productive and passionate teams. Now, if this concept of getting insights from your peers regarding your work sounds familiar, it should, because that's the simple goal of this group: connecting, communicating, collaborating. Support me, support the group. Follow the link below, recruiting.org/Checkster. This will take you to a landing page to sign up for a quick demo. If you are just thinking about automating your reference checking process, it'll be well worth your time. But I encourage you to check out the full Insights suite. I'd love to find out if you feel the way I feel about it. Now let's get to today's roundtable. All right, let's jump right into it. Thank you everybody for attending episode 79 in Let's Talk Recruiting, where peer practitioners across our industry all get together and talk about various topics that we all come across on a daily basis. Our topic for today is ways to manage a recruiting desk of 25 recs or more. And if you fall into that bucket on a daily basis, I really feel your pain. No offense, but I'm glad it's you and not me, because that sounds just like an outrageous way to get through each day. But I hear some horror stories every now and then about rec loads. With us today, we have Mark Wolin out of Dallas, Michael Lashitsky. Did I get it right, Michael? All right. And out of Boston, I have Mike Haley out of Chicago and Courtney Lewis out of Atlanta. So with that said, we're going to jump right into it. And Mark, can we jump over to you and have you start the conversation?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Appreciate the time that you're taking to listen to us. I've been with SiriusXM in Pandora for it'll be 10 years in January. I'm a senior manager and lead technical recruiter for the company, so I mainly focus on tech, engineering, program project management, basically anything that touches tech for the company. So it's something where I think that from a perspective of my view, it's hiring hard to fill positions. So I traditionally have had maybe 25 to 30 positions on average, sometimes a bit more. So this is very relevant for me. So you ready to just jump into our points, Sean?
Yeah, just jump right in. You got it.
Okay, cool. Awesome. So as far as my topic area, I think rec prioritization, I know that was a comment that many people made that are a part of this call, and ranking system more than anything are important when you're managing 25 or more recs. So a lot of that obviously comes from your intake meetings as well as status meetings that you're having with your hiring managers. And assigning, I guess, how critical the role is to the business. So hopefully you have some exposure to interacting with your senior leaders that you can find out how important each position is to the overall business. And that will help you as far as your ranking system. I try to have at least 3 candidates against every single position. If I do not have 3 candidates against each position, those other positions become a focus area for me. So I at least have some momentum on each. So it's really, to me, it's a combination of that ranking based on business and hiring manager urgency, and then what you currently have in play. And then touching on a topic that we had a couple weeks back is integrating that into your calendar planning. And so if it's something where you're light on candidates for a specific role, use that time block in the afternoon to make sure that you're sourcing, or if you have a sourcer, making sure that they're focused on that. It's really just a combination of those factors for me.
So Mark, let me ask you, and to your point, yeah, the prioritization of recs was like a big point from both this one and the last session where we talked about managing your day. Do you have, and I get the, hey, I need 3 applicants in play, right? And when you say against a rec, basically you mean they're in the funnel, right? To going through it. So I got 3, let's say you got 3 in there, you move it on to your next rec. Do you give yourself, and this is just sort of for all panelists too, do you give yourself a time limit? So let's say you prioritize these 5 recs I need to be working on today. It's an hour and a half gone by. you're at 0 for 3 on that first rec. Are you kind of calling it a day and moving on to the next one, or do you set a little time limit for yourself?
Yeah, I do think that a refresh of your time is important. So, I mean, sometimes you might be running into a brick wall that day. You do need to adjust. You can't really go against what you've planned for your day. At least, again, this is my personal view. So I do try to meet my objectives, but if I've planned something a certain way and I don't reach that goal, I just carry it into the next day's planning.
So to the other panelists, because this is sort of how I always kind of did. I spend a certain amount of time on a rec, and then I'd move on, come back, and take that break. Does anybody else do that, or how do you manage if you have, hey, I got to hit these 5 recs today? How do you manage if you're stuck on rec number 1 or 2?
I usually just put time blocks in my calendar and like, hey, I'm going to focus specifically on a platform engineer. You know, we have 3 of them, and then move on to the next one because I'm super ADD in general anyways. So it's like I need to kind of break things up and just provide kind of a different atmosphere or environment rather. So just to kind of keep things fresh.
My favorite way to handle one rec, if you have 3 that you have to get to today and you have a hiring manager or a stakeholder who's coming at you nonstop, is to put time on their calendar for tomorrow. And that way you can handle it tomorrow morning, or you can handle it at a different time, but you've already addressed the need to communicate with that manager.
I mean, what I do for myself is I try to make sure I set certain goals. So say like if I want to make sure I'm sourced for a particular position, I say, okay, I have to have sourced at least for these 5 particular positions, or I need to have, sent out communications to candidates or done something according, for each individual rec. I just kind of manage my time that way so that I'm making sure that I'm at least hitting something with each rec. Regardless of whatever else I have going on. I'm not able to leave or do anything else for that day until I've done this. So no matter how tired I am, I don't care what else I got going on, I have to do this before I leave for the day.
And do we kind of follow Mark's, like I call that, when you say 3 against rec, I call that slate, like slate management. Mm-hmm. And everybody's got different terms for the same thing, it seems, across the industry. I'm going to call it slate management for today. Do we also kind of do that? Because I used to do that same thing. I need this amount of people in play for each rec, and then I move on to the next. Just call those slates. Do you guys do that?
I absolutely do. I'm somewhat of an industry similar to Mark, where I might not have the luxury of having 3 Kubernetes engineers on hand, right? So it's kind of like, all right, I got one awesome engineer. Let's move on to the next position. Yeah, I definitely want to make sure that I touch all the high priority roles, and each manager is going to scream and say like, hey, no, mine's top priority, but obviously we know that's not true. So, but kind of keeping the momentum going.
Yeah, for mine, same thing. I like to have 3, even if it's 1 awesome one and 2 not so great people that they have previously indicated wouldn't be a good fit. If I'm helping them understand that we're struggling and that this is what the next caliber of candidate looks like, again, you're keeping the hiring team in the loop as to where things are at and how much work you've been doing to source or to address the challenges that you're seeing with the candidates.
And it seems there's a couple of questions as far as if each is assigned equal priority. Yeah, that happens all the time for us. Everyone will say, yeah, mine's the most urgent position. And so you're not going to always meet the 3 candidates or whatever your own slate management schedule is aligned to. And so it's really what can you sacrifice knowing that you can get those candidates later that you really need to focus on now. And so I'm going to always focus on the ones that are a little bit tougher. If it's like desktop support, if I know that desktop support is one of my 25, I'm not going to focus as much time on that because I know those are pretty easy to get. So it's really based on your knowledge of the skill set and how quickly you can get people into that funnel and balancing that as well.
Yeah, I think for me, I kind of do the opposite. For me, I make sure if it's an easy to fill position, I go ahead and get those out of the way and get those off my plate so that I'm not having to still sit there with the 25 recs. I'm like, oh my goodness, I got all these recs. I like to try to get the easy to fills in and out. That way, I'm no longer looking at those. So I'll go on ahead and start looking at my hard to fill and being able to say, okay, I need to have at least, slate at least 2 to 3 people per role at that point. But my easy to fills, I get those completely off straight, quick and fast in a hurry.
When we talk about our prioritization list, when we have our list, whether it's in our head or you have it listed in a spreadsheet somewhere, are we keeping that list kind of close to chest, or are we talking to hiring managers about that? So let's say you have hiring managers that's at the bottom of that list. Are we letting them know that we're not going to get till next week, or how are we managing that little piece of, you're at the bottom of my priority list, but I don't want you to feel bad about it? How is that?
I wouldn't say I tell them that they're at the bottom of the list, because then that could certainly cause issues. But I always do like to keep timelines, like, hey, you know what, I'm going to have either a batch of candidates for you by Tuesday, or we're going to at least have an update on kind of what are we doing, where are we sourcing, where are we talking to people. And I think you have to tee that up with your stakeholder as well, or your HR business partner, because they do provide air cover for you as well when the business is getting noisy, and you want to make sure that you can still maintain focus. Like, no, these are the priorities based on the intake sessions, or whatever conversations you've had with your boss, and so on and so forth.
Well, this is kind of a curveball question. I don't know the answer to it. When you're prioritizing your Reqs, does the days that it's been open matter more than your slate being filled or not? By that, I mean, if it's been open for 60 days, but you have 3 people in your slate going through it, does that days open versus that, hey, how many people are going through the funnel come into play at all? Or I'm just kind of trying to get into, how do you guys determine prioritization versus, hey, if it's a VP or director level, hey, it's probably going to be at the top of your list or higher up there. Mm-hmm. But just generally speaking, when prioritizing, how do you determine your priorities?
So days to fill definitely play a role for me, because I don't want a rec sitting on my desk 60 days. I don't, unfortunately, I'm not able to have that. Even if I wanted to have a rec sitting on there for 60 days, I don't think that's allowed. But I definitely, if I seen that the rec has been out there for, longer than I want it to be, then I know that I need to go back and start sourcing again. I need to push a little bit harder on that particular rec. That way it's not sitting there for 30 days. Once it hits the 30-day mark, I really need to really focus and buckle down on that, because I can't have it sitting there that long, because it affects the business after a while.
Yeah, we have a different. Go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Mark. I was just going to say quickly. I think the time it's been open and the cycle time is definitely a factor. But for me, it's also a bigger piece as to where in the process you are in the different other recs. So if I have candidates that are ready to schedule and ready to get to interview, that's usually my go-to, other than maybe extending offers. Because if they're sitting and they're waiting to find out interview times, or waiting to find out if they're getting an offer, I think that's a huge area where an opportunity to lose candidates, or to have the hiring manager kind of change the specs. So those are 2 areas that I focus on. And then if I need more prioritization elsewhere, I'm looking at cycle time and days it's been open.
Yeah, it's really, for us, it's a combination of everything that the other panelists have mentioned. We have a little bit different approach. We're not as held to time to fill as a lot of people are, and it's because of our position focus areas. And so if we've got a satellite engineer or something else that's extremely niche based, there's no way we can hold it to like a traditional 30 to 60 time to fill. It's really more about quality for us in a lot of our areas. And so that's really where my initial response came from, is that it's a balance between how long is it open, the priority for the business, the leveling. Yeah, that all does factor in.
Right, I agree.
Does anybody use, and this would come up in a conversation if you were having a conversation with the hiring manager, what have you, or in my case, and this is why I'm kind of drilling down a little bit in it, I have a VP who wants to be able to see all of their Reqs and wants to be able to quickly know whether it's green light, yellow light, or red light, literally the little icons to it. So aside from having a field, which we don't have in the ATS, where the recruiter can say green, yellow, red, that's where I'm kind of drilling down into what thinking's around determining that priority. And does the status of a rec, green, yellow, red, come into play in your prioritization of working that rec? I'm going to assume so, like your red lights kind of get worked on. Does anybody ever do red, yellow, green reporting type stuff?
To a point. We use Visier at Wayfair, so we do have these dashboards that we're looking at, but I think too, it comes into play with building that relationship with your stakeholder. Like, I mean, I'm talking to them daily on activity and things like that. But if there's a hiring manager, for instance, within that group that, just has been very standoffish on or responding to you with feedback or things like that, they're going to go to that red light model, right? Like, you're going to go to the bottom of the totem pole in terms of priority. So, and you got to be vocal with that with your stakeholders, but most times, they're like, hey, yeah, focus on, what we can fill right this second. So.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I'm very transparent when it comes down to my HR, and very transparent when I come down to my VP. So if they're wanting a report that tells them where we are in the different processes and telling them what we are with the different positions, I try to make sure that I'm able to. I put myself in position so that I'm able to update them before I leave each day. That's kind of, and it also helps me for the next day when I'm coming in. So I do it for myself just so that if they ask, I can let them know what's going on.
I found these types of reportings kind of help keep the noise down a little bit. And manage the noise. I think you can manage your desk a little bit better. All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Mark. Michael, let's jump over to you and your items.
Yeah, good deal. So Mike Leszewski, senior recruiter with Wayfair. So I support the platform engineering group, which essentially what we're hiring for is anything infrastructure. So DevOps, SREs, Kubernetes, all that fun stuff. So definitely very challenging. So I'm lucky if I get one or two per requisition, but how do we take priority? I think it all starts with the intake session. It's like how valuable is that for our more or less for our recruitment just philosophy, and how does that take priority in terms of, okay, like what can wait? How many engineers do I have here for a specific skill set, and what do I have over here? So we want to make sure we're cognizant of that. If we're looking for 3 Kubernetes engineers and they all have to relocate to Boston, it's probably not going to be a 30-day, fill position. So, and working with my team too, we're all full cycle, but we're not afraid to ask for help as well. So, I think stemming from that intake session, weekly cadence reports to your hiring managers / stakeholders, understanding where we're at, but also too, I think, what happens when you identify that candidate? Like, how fast can we move? So having an interview schedule or roster already set up, like, hey, these are the 4 components of the interview. These are the 10 engineers / stakeholders that, are ready to go. Just look at their calendars and we can move this person, in fairly quickly. So, and then, don't be afraid to, work with your HR VPs to, again, provide that air cover just in case, noise, as it always does, when there's 25 recs on the table, kind of surfaces.
So kind of a in the weeds question for you around scheduling the interviews or calendaring. Do you have a scheduling coordinator that kind of takes that off the desk?
Yep. So we have a candidate, we call them candidate experience associates at Wayfair. So pretty much we have every interviewer programmed into the position. And so we just have to send off the availability of the candidate. And these are the 4 to 6 people we need on the interview panels. And they kind of just take it from there. So they take that out of our hands.
Is there anybody on the panel who does not have a scheduling coordinator?
I've never had a scheduling coordinator ever. I wish, but no, I've never had one of them. What is a scheduling coordinator? I don't know what that is. Am I it? I think I'm the person that does that. No, never.
With our acquisition of Pandora last year, so with SiriusXM traditionally did not. We didn't have a recruiting coordinator team, but Pandora was much more forward thinking than we are on that side. And so we adapted to their model where we do have recruiting coordinators.
Yeah, if you're a recruiter with a large rec load or even a smaller rec load, I mean, they're worth their weight in gold from my experience.
100%
gets it done. Yeah, especially if you're talking travel, if you're, pre-COVID and you're flying people in and all that kind of effort and time that it takes around there. I just highly recommend a company get those positions on their team if they can, even if it's contract. Great way to train a recruiter or somebody who's new and wants to be a recruiter is to start out as a coordinator, in my opinion. All right. Michael, I think you talked earlier in a different discussion around staying ahead of the game, where knowing where kind of like hiring against plan. Like if you can get a company that can tell you, hey, in Q2, we're hiring this, in Q3, this, and Q4, that. Can you kind of speak to staying ahead of the game and kind of?
Yeah, definitely. We actually, oh, I'm sorry, you're asking Mike, not Michael.
Yeah, Michael.
Oh, got it. Okay, I apologize. Yeah, so I actually just had a meeting last Friday with my stakeholders, and it's like, hey, what are the biggest priorities for the end of 2020? We're kind of going into an infrastructure lockout where no changes. We're not going to be doing any interviewing really after Black Friday until really first week of, second week of December. But anyway, I'm like, what's coming, 2020? What can we start pipelining for in 2021, like as soon as we get past the new year? So, understanding, we're going to be planning for some attrition, but also like, hey, we're going to have some net new ads. So, what does that look like? And I think, again, just having that communication where you can kind of, again, to your point, get ahead of it and, start putting some pipeline recs together and, putting your feelers out there too. So I think things are going to slow down a little bit for the holidays.
So yeah, that was my question. Like, what do you literally do? So do you post your pipeline recs and create candidate flow? Okay.
Yep, exactly. And I think it's just, you just tee it up as, hey, we're going to be looking to hiring, first couple weeks of the new year. So, that is the timeline, but you'd love to kind of get things in motion. And we're not afraid to interview beforehand, but we're going to kind of hold that close to our chest for the first week or first month rather.
And there's no system issues with your ATS around posting pre-rec, I guess?
We do have pipeline recs. I'm still old school. I just have a nice doc or Google Doc where I keep people's resumes, and we'll eventually get them in the system and get them squared away from a compliance perspective. But typically when we're just doing feelers, like we'll set up calls and things like that, and just kind of keep it somewhat, not I don't know.
But are they applying to a job through ATS, or are they just sending you the resume?
I'm sorry, what was that?
When you do a pipeline rec, are they just sending you a resume, or are they applying to a job?
No, so if there's a pipeline rec, they will be applying. At least most of my recruitment is outbound anyway, so I don't typically see a lot of volume that way, unfortunately. I would love it if that was the case.
Go ahead.
Yeah, we have a similar model where we don't expect someone to fill out a full application, especially on a pipeline rec. Our application now is actually just a resume when we moved over to JobBite earlier this year. It used to be a more extensive application in the past.
But that resume still goes through JobBite and through the ATS?
It does, yeah. It does still go through JobBite for us.
Got it. Yeah, I've been working on a project about where do we stand? It's that same senior VP, hiring against plan. So this company's got it where they're scheduling out ahead of time, which I know exists out there, but I rarely see it. When you can get out a couple quarters ahead of the game, and then it's all about how do we get through the year and then plan for the next year. So it's really nice to see that, and it's just interesting to see how it allows a TA team to kind of plan for their pipelining, to plan for their headcount on their team. So it's. I
think to Michael's point too. Yeah, if you take more of a holistic approach to you as a recruiter and getting more involved with your business, that can only help you in your career as well. And so hopefully you have the capability. I know some very large companies, you can't get it, but hopefully you can partner more with your HRBP so you get a lot of that senior exposure. But I know some very large companies, they're very segmented where the HRBP only has that contact. Hopefully you're given some of that awareness on your side as well.
I think too, Mark, to your point, it's all about collaboration. So working, even having that weekly cadence call, 15, 20 minutes with your HRBP, like, hey, John Smith resigned, he's giving us 60 days notice, we're going to have to start, thinking about this role. It's not approved yet, but, start putting some things together and from a recruitment perspective. So just having that quick call, it's like, hey, you just found out you have another role coming down the pipe here. So how do we prepare for that?
Got it. All right, excellent. Mike, before we jump over to you, I'm going to put in a quick poll here. This is for all the audience members and the panelists. And I'm just trying to get an idea of, on average, what is your rec load? So if I could get everybody to answer that as we jump over to Mike, can we just sort of get into your topic also?
Yeah, sure thing. Sean, you want me to jump in while we're polling?
Yeah, I'll just let it run for like a minute and then we'll pull it.
Sounds good. So Mike Haley, I'm a talent acquisition specialist at BP. I support recruitment from an experienced hire perspective for our trading and shipping business. Before that, I recruited at GE and have recruited on various parts of BP in different areas. And then was that an agency before GE? So the quick thing I wanted to bring up today that didn't really come up in a lot of the Q&A and the pre-meeting discussion, nor has it come up much in our discussion so far today, I think is pretty important. That's the ability to really loop in your manager and effectively partner with them to help either prioritize, perhaps you'll get their perspective on pain points that your manager is seeing, and that can help you understand, listen, if I handle these 3 recs, this is going to be less heat off my manager, which in turn is going to hopefully, increase your chances of success. So that's one aspect. The second piece is if you're working with your manager, you can work to learn a little bit more. Number one, even if you have a good manager, a lot of times, they'll think of you as a good recruiter who can handle it, or who's handled more recs in the past, maybe not knowing that all of them happen to be at the same status, or there happens to be a larger percentage of challenging recs at this time. So they can look at their reports and assume things are going well. So if you're communicating them directly, even if it is a good manager who should be on top of where you're at, you're going to help your chances for success, because maybe they can loop in other teammates, fellow recruiters who happen to have capacity. And I find that sometimes if I'm already talking with my teammates and I have a good name to suggest of somebody who's perhaps volunteered to help out a little bit, that makes it even easier for your manager in that discussion. The second option that the manager might have is, and depending on how big your team, your recruiting team is perhaps go to that coordinator who wants to take on more responsibility, or is looking to develop into a junior recruiter or a more senior level recruiter. Help encourage that, help partner with that individual. Maybe it's just your coordinator to give them more responsibilities, or to do some resume review and things like that are typically outside of their spec. And then finally, maybe if you have sourcing teams, same thing, you can work with them to really bulk up pipelines or bulk up efforts in resume review and candidate outreach, things like that sourcing teams may not specifically be aligned to. But those 3 pieces, and then additionally, finally, maybe you're talking with agencies. Maybe you're having an agency help you and handle a rec that's been a sticking point, or the cycle time's pretty nasty on. But all of those pieces are really hard to do if you don't have a good relationship and a good discussion with your manager. So I think for me, I learned that early on. I kind of assumed I had a great manager. They knew they can look at the reports. They should know I'm working my tail off. They should understand that. But a lot of times, if they're asking you, you're saying in your weekly meetings, yeah, things are going well, I'm busy. And that's what they want to hear, but they don't really put 2 and 2 together sometimes.
Yeah, Mike, I'll emphasize that. I call it segmenting, right? The duties around the candidates, right? When you spoke about having a coordinator do it or a sourcer, I'll give you a real world example that worked like a charm for me, is where I spoke about scheduling coordinators and how they're so essential before, but also a dedicated sourcer. So typically your sourcer is just outbound recruiting, finding the people, screening them, and putting them into the process. And that's the end of the sourcing cycle for a dedicated sourcer. We've done it twice and it happened to be the same sourcer. She was fantastic. She would do her sourcing duties, but then she would also own the applicants in the candidate flow. So she would source, but then she'd also own every person who applied, screen them, move the ones forward. And she would support like 2 or 3 recruiters in that, where if those recruiters, like their head was below water, she would come in and basically clean up the recs, right, with all the candidate flow. And they didn't have to worry about doing interviews or screens. That worked like a charm. And it's basically an agency model where you have your recruiter that handles the candidates, account managers handle the hiring managers. Has anybody done that in more of an ongoing basis at their companies, where you are segmenting, here you handle the candidates and then this other person handles the hiring managers? Has anybody experienced that?
I'm doing it now, just because I'm handling the platform engineering, but I'm also pivoting to help out a colleague who just needs more bandwidth, right? So I'm kind of doing that sourcer recruiter model where I'm pulling people together, and once I've qualified them, put them through an assessment, it's like colleague takes it over and runs with it, right? So, and deals with the hiring manager. If there's an offer, like she's going to handle it A to Z. It's like, and again, it's kind of our model, like we're all full cycle, but we're not all going to be busy or maxed out for each and every department, right? So it's like we kind of pivot with our manager's insight and kind of go from there.
Yeah, we've got similar where traditionally it's been more full cycle for me, but since the acquisition of Pandora last year, we did inherit some sourcers. And so I traditionally have not leveraged the sourcers except for the harder to fill positions, just because it allows them a little bit more time to focus on those particular roles than I might have.
Yeah, I found if you're a professional sourcer, you can scan resumes really quick. That sort of aids in getting through a high, I call it an unreviewed rate, where people applied, but they never really got looked at because recruiters just didn't have the time to do it. Yeah, highly encourage it. Even getting back to your point, Mike, about engaging a source or a staffing agency, or even just bringing in somebody on contract, putting them on payroll and helping you get them out of the weeds on a short-term project type deal if they're an experienced recruiter at it. I've done it, works like a charm. I highly recommend it. All right. Real quick on the poll. So 20, more than 50, 6 people, 12%. I feel your pain. That seems incredible to me. And then 25 to 50, 21% got that, 11 people, some very busy recruiters out there. I have found, and this is on limited reporting and limited research, that the magic number for a full life cycle recruiter who's working, they're not working a bunch of evergreen recs, right, where they're making placements off a few recs, but working separate recs, that 18 seemed to be the magic number, where they could produce a hire per week. Let's just say that's the number. If they had less than 18 recs, they wouldn't quite hit 1, but if they had more than 18, they're still producing 1 hire per week. So that seemed to be like the sweet spot for my little research that I did, again, limited. But that was like, seemed to be the magic number of how many hires can I produce off of how many recs. 18 seemed to be the magic number. Has anybody ever looked into anything like that to see what's your sweet spot for rec load?
Honestly, I would say 25 is probably my max. I would love to keep it around 10 to 15, and that's typically too, if they're almost the same profile, if it's a mixed bag, it's, a sales engineer is going to be completely different than, a senior software engineer in terms of priority. And, I guess the work that goes into it as well to you get them in the interview process. But yeah, that's what I would, I always shoot for rather. So.
Yeah, I'm told pretty much the similar that 10 to 15 would be fantastic. I would take 15 to 20, but usually I've been 25 to 30, and I'd love to consider that my max, but I've been over that during my time here as well.
All right. Courtney, how about we jump over to you and you right now?
Oh, my turn. Okay. Yeah. So for me, Courtney Lewis, I was working as a recruiter with DSC Logistics, no longer working with them because of COVID, the layoff. But for the past year and a half, I did high volume recruitment. So anywhere between, I could easily have 30 recs thrown on my desk at one time because it's very high volume, and they were a lot of times in startup mode. So when you have startup mode, that means I need a lot of people within a short amount of time. So with that being said, so for me, I like to have come to Courtney moments where I say, Courtney, you have to understand what you can and cannot handle. And so I start asking myself, if my recs are getting too high, I say, do you need to start doing a job fair? Do you need to start thinking about possibly, because you can easily get a lot of candidates at one time. And then also you can get your managers in the building. They can do on-site interviews, and they can go on ahead and get these positions filled, help get these positions filled a lot faster versus you having to do all the work by yourself. And then the other thing, pretty much like you guys say, just communicate and be just as try to be transparent with people when they're bringing you requisitions. You're like, okay, I have this, this, and this. Where can you get this filled, and where does it lie in the number of recs that you have? But the main thing, like you said, going back to prioritization, that's very, very important. Figuring out what's easy to fill, what you can go on ahead and get off your desk. And then from there, figuring out which position has the most impact on the company. And you want to make sure you get those filled as soon as possible, because some positions may not have as much impact as others. Say like a lead position. If I need to get a lead position done, I need to go on ahead and get that done. But I also like to make sure that I try to be prepared for the influx. I look at my peak season. I know when we're going to get an influx of positions because of the fact that, around Christmas time, hey, we're gonna need more people, we're gonna need more staff. So I try to make sure I know what my end game or what is to come. So yeah, that's why I said. I said a lot.
So let me ask you a question around the coming to Courtney moment and around kind of tools to help a recruiter help manage their overwhelmed desk. Does anybody use a tool like I've used Calendly, where you kind of open up your calendar and people can book time? It seems to be like a hit or miss 50-50 with recruiters like doing that or not. And to me, it seems like it would alleviate scheduling time on my end, maybe not to everybody, but I would give it out to certain people who could book time on my open calendar. I'd have to keep it up to date, of course. But does anybody use that type of tool or anything similar to it? I know some ATSs have it built in now where you're opening up your calendar to kind of help you pick up that scheduling.
Yeah. Calendly was my best friend. So yes, I was able to include those in emails sometimes and say, hey, if you're interested in a role, I feel like, you'll be a great candidate. Go ahead and let's set up some time, and just send them the link, and they're able to get on there and handle it. That way, it cuts down on my communicating time with them. It cuts down on a lot.
Yeah, we use Good Time, and we have it integrated with Greenhouse. I think it's great for probably more of the distribution center positions, things like that. But usually when I'm on the phone with, very high profile candidates, like I'm going to get that availability right up front. But I definitely see the value in it as well, where it just takes kind of that step out of the process. But for me, it's kind of hit or miss.
Yeah. Calendly becomes my, what you call it, recruiting coordinator.
Yeah.
That's who's my recruiting coordinator. It's Calendly.
Have you ever had a coordinator, Courtney?
No, never. I've always been, Calendly was my coordinator. There we go. That was it. I always had to do full cycle. Sometimes I've had HR to step in and say, they'll help, especially again, when I have that come to Courtney moment. It's like, I know I've taken on too much. So I'll, ask them if they can help out, and they'll handle that part sometimes for me. But for the most part, it's always been me by myself working it.
You don't know what you're missing. I always worked in operations and corporate, so the coordinators would be on my team. So I always try and maintain a 3-to-1 ratio, 3 recruiters per coordinator. That seemed to.
Now what I'm missing, it sounds like gold. I need that. I know I'm missing it.
So back to like calendar management. So how, like we always say, we all live in our inbox and email and stuff like that. Are we living on our calendar also? Is it something that we're checking multiple times every hour? Or how important is calendar management in our lives?
I think it has become a lot more important right now because a lot of things are handling virtual. So it has definitely become very, very important for me because, again, we're doing virtual interviews. We're doing, virtual meetings. Some people are not going in the office. Everything is virtual. So I'm having to keep up with my calendar. If my calendar was not there, I would not stay on track for anything.
Yeah, I agree with that. If it's not on my calendar, it's not something I'm going to do. So I'm probably a little bit more detail oriented than necessary, but I try not to think about my task until I see that reminder come up so that I can be focused on what I need to be doing right now.
And then it also allows you to slate out time for you to be able to work on your requisitions. So you can say, you know what, I need to be doing this and this between that time. No one can set up any intakes, meetings. Do not send me anything during this time because I'm focused on this. And it just kind of helps just manage. It's the time management thing for me with calendar, being able to manage my time.
And does everybody have video interviewing integrated into their calendar? So it's a click away?
Yep.
Yes.
So let's say we get through COVID and it's all in the past. Is anybody going to leave video interviewing and go back to face-to-face as the first interviews? Are we all going to keep rolling with the video?
From an on-site or just interviews with candidates like
pre-on-site, recruiter and the candidate, pre-on-site?
I mean, I use Google Meets, but I just use it as a phone bridge rather. But yeah, once we're back in the office, whenever that is, we'll definitely be pushing a lot of things back to on-site.
I think it depends upon. Go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry.
Courtney, I was just saying we use HireVue and used it before COVID, which is especially phenomenal to screen your high volume, some of your lower level roles. A lot of our refinery based roles, sometimes those can tend to be real convenient, or if some of our shipping based roles where folks may not be able to come in for interviews. We used that before and are using it now in addition to Microsoft Teams, and could definitely seeing, I think the candidates, I think we've had some pretty good responses. Where we're seeing, I think where we're going to see better feedback is from our side, the hiring teams who are now more comfortable with video, who in the past didn't want it.
Mike, with HireVue, correct me if I'm wrong, but they have what's it called, asynchronous interviewing, where they record themselves answering questions. Do you utilize that?
Yeah, so there's on demand, which is I think the asynchronous that you're talking about, and then there's also a more traditional live interview option. And so we've utilized both. Our on demand, I know we utilize heavily in some of our early careers groups where there's higher volume, more repetitive, I guess, questions that you want to, tougher competition where you want to kind of come down and be able to evaluate a bit more. So yeah, we've utilized both.
So are we finding those asynchronous on-demand interviews time savers? And a second question for you is, at what point do you say, yeah, I can't do that? So for is it individual contributors below or just early careers and below?
So I like how BP does it. We enable our recruiting teams and recruiters to decide what screening method is best for them in a lot of parts. I guess an exception would be our early careers folks who do it all pretty uniformly. But for me on my experienced hire team, we have the ability. So for my personal choice is for the lower level positions, individual contributors, and more junior level positions, I'm definitely doing HireVue because we don't have Calendly and some of the calendar pieces to schedule those interviews. It'd destroy my day to try to connect with that many candidates when my rec loads are up around 40 from time to time. And then on the higher level positions, same thing. I don't want anything to do with it. The candidates, I think, are more resistant. And so I love personally to be able to evaluate the candidates more effectively in the screening setup. So if your model allows it, you've got the ability to kind of pick and choose between the different approaches with the different levels. To me, I think that's the best way to do it.
Got it. Okay, so
I completely agree with that. It's dependent on the leveling. Oh, sorry. Yeah, definitely dependent on the leveling for us as well. A senior software engineer is typically not going to take the time to. We use Top Pick for those video pre-screen type of questions, and most likely that's going to turn them away. So right now we just use it for internship level roles, which is a great time saver, and it's pretty efficient, and they're more than happy to do it as well.
Mark, do you use coding tests for your developers?
Some of our groups do. Yeah, they have a strict coding test that they put together. We also do live coding via a tool called CodeBunk that mimics a real-time coding environment that will run your code or fail your code.
And when do you introduce that to a candidate? Getting back to if it's too early.
Usually, it's something where it's incorporated into the team interview portion. So whether that's first or second, depending on the manager. It's usually something we ask that they save until the latter half of that interview so that they make sure they're not wasting that candidate's time if they can't answer the high level technical questions to start the interview.
All right, so a question on the interviewing. Does anybody know of tools, tips, tactics, what have you, around the best ways to gather interview feedback from the hiring team? Are there any tips or tricks around that? Or I've seen some tools where it always has to go through the system and you can't see anybody's feedback until you put yours in, and then you get to little ticklers, reminders. Gathering interview feedback. Any thoughts around that time aspect?
I think, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, you can go ahead.
I think with us, I think this is the best in my recruiting experience. It's like we have scorecards that are sent out immediately after the interview and they have to fill them out. And we have a debrief it's already on books before the interview happens. So typically our SLA is within 72 hours. So if their feedback is consistently not there, then we're going to put the position on hold. So I would say this is probably the best scenario or best experience I've had where we walk in there, 4 out of the 5 scorecards are filled out. We know who they are and so on and so forth. But having that very concise, in-depth feedback translated so we can understand where we stand with the position before even walking into the meeting. Like, hey, we're probably going to be making an offer to this candidate. from the looks of things, or not doesn't look good, but we still want to debrief and understand, did we miss the mark, or was it just bad candidate in the sense of experience level?
That's system generated through your ATS?
Yep.
Which one do you use?
Greenhouse.
Okay. And Courtney, sorry, you were saying something?
I was pretty much going to say the same thing that Michael said. For the most part, I send out the feedback before the interview. I send it because before we started doing with the ATS program, was able to get it sent out that way. We had to do those manually or wait on them to send an email with, their information, how they felt. I will remind them in the email when I get ready to set up the interview, say, hey, right after the interview, can you go on ahead and send me that feedback? Or when I know that they've already conducted the interview, I send them a quick reminder, I'm gonna need feedback right after this interview. But once I was able to start sending it through the ATS program, I just kind of continue to follow up with them and say, hey, I want to go on ahead and get this person. If this is the one that you want to move forward with, I'm gonna need your feedback as soon as possible so that we do not lose this candidate. Again, just communicate with them as much as possible. If I need to blow up your email, I blow up your email and say, hey, send me the information so I can get this candidate or put this candidate out of their misery so they're not waiting. And I make sure to relay this information with HRBPs. I make sure to relay this long before we even start the interview process, making sure they know I need feedback when these interviews happen. We don't want to lose candidates because that's the quickest way, is waiting on feedback.
Right. I love tools that have the drip effect, right? If something that's not done, the system sends the reminder so you don't have to always be following behind people.
Right.
All right. I think we've gone over a little bit. Any from the tools perspective, right? From aside from strategy and working with hiring managers, any tools out there that help you get your job done when you have this type of rec load that you know of out there?
I think, Sean, one thing that I've seen when I've mentored some other recruiters that they are often missing, and that is a readily available tool, is the use of quick parts. A lot of folks maybe use templates, but I think quick parts and the ability to type out part of a commonly used candidate email or hiring manager email, I think using quick parts effectively is a huge time saver and can really help.
And what is that? I've never even heard of that one. It's an application?
So it's like quick text or automatic text that pops up that you're utilizing within Outlook. And so it's similar to a template, but it's more specific. You can define images and text that accompany an interview scheduling email, or I have one that I used for my coordinator that has the interview scheduling information that we need. And then I have one that goes to my hiring manager talking about my intake. And then there's some that goes to a candidate who, didn't end up getting the job or getting the interview. And then I can kind of add in pieces as I need. But it's an amazing tool, saves a ton of time for commonly typed out information.
And that's within Outlook, right?
Yep.
Got it. I use it's called Stream Deck. It's like a gamer live streamer thing. Stole it from my son, where it's buttons and it's kind of like insert quick text, and you can put whatever you want in there. You can create folders and stuff like that. But it's a push of a button if you're not in Outlook or what have you. I love there's a lot to be learned. If you live on a keyboard your whole day, check out the world of gamers. They got all these cool little gadgets out there to make the fingers go quicker, I guess. All right, so yeah, excellent suggestion that those templates have that ready to go type language. Any thoughts around like tools out there?
For me, I created a spreadsheet in Google Suites that I was able to share with my HRBP, so I could put all of my different recs on there, put where I am with that rec. If I'm sourcing it, they know I'm sourcing it. They're able to log in, view the spreadsheet just as it's happening anytime that they want. So then that also eliminates the whole, I have to constantly let them know what's going on, when they can just log into it, look and see where I'm at with this requisition. And it helped a lot because it kind of kept some of the meetings down from, hey, where are you at with this? Oh, you're able to look right at it and see it.
Anybody else? Michael, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, this is again benefit of having an ops department is that we have a group that can send out weekly reports on the different Reqs across the enterprise. And so if you're at a little bit larger company, you have the benefit folks that can save you time on that side, because as long as you update your Reqs at least once a week, they're given that real-time picture into what's going on.
A tool we've been using, we actually just onboarded it within the last 6 weeks or so, is Visier. So very similar to Tableau, just I would say prettier in that sense. So great data visualization tool. So we just kind of did the rollout, and it's been great. I mean, it shows us real time dashboards of what's going on per recruiter, what the requisitions are doing, how many people are tied to it, things like that. So you can see all that activity, and then you can do a quick snapshot where it just captures it, and you can put it in your fancy email that you send out every Friday to your stakeholders, which is nice. Like, hey, here's the real raw data, cleaned up a little bit for you. What's happening in the business. So that's definitely one of my more favorite tools at this point. I'm definitely gonna have to check out the tool Mike was referring to that might make my life a little bit easier.
Michael, what was the name of it?
Visier.
Visier, okay.
Yep.
Right. I think you've mentioned that to me before. Yeah, I've started to learn Tableau. So I'm like getting focused on that because I just think it's come down. Tableau seems to be the BI tool of choice out there, or any BI tool really, but that's the language that the hiring team and the business units are taking their information in. So it's going to be up to recruiters to deliver it in that style of language, I guess, if you want to call it business intelligence.
Yeah.
Language.
I mean, it just provides you all, it just pulls all that data and puts it into one place for you rather. So it keeps it concise instead of having it on, 6 different dry erase boards that I do have in my office here. So.
Yeah, Mark, to your point, I used to do the Monday morning update, right? It's just a nice rhythm every Monday morning. You got your update from the previous week, but I always did it in Excel. And then the question back would be, well, how do I chop this up and filter it and search it? I'm like, yeah, you really can't. It's kind of just Excel. That's why I think these BI tools are getting to be real interesting.
Yeah.
All right. This one was a long one. Very good conversation. Appreciate everybody. Any final thoughts or comments?
No.
Do your best to get below 25 Reqs if you can. I know it's not a recruiter's choice. I don't know how to help you on that one, but I appreciate everybody's time. Another great conversation. I'll let you go and enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll talk to you soon.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Sean, have a great day, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.